Well, hello everybody, Mr. Mack here. Uh, I'm glad you've come back. We are going to read the next two chapters of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, chapters 9 and 10. Now, Charlie just had his birthday, and he got his one candy bar a year. That's all his family could ever afford. And of course, his birthday fell right at the perfect time, right at the time when Willy Wonka sent out those 5 golden tickets out across the world. And he hoped, and his family hoped, but when he opened his candy bar, it was just the delicious chocolate, and which was wonderful, and everyone was a little bit disappointed, but Charlie was still grateful, and not only that, but he offered his small candy bar to everyone so that everyone could take part. No one did. No one did. His grandparents, his parents, no one did. They said, "No, Charlie, it's your birthday. You eat the candy bar." Charlie's a good boy in every way. But 4 people, those 5 tickets Willy Wonka sent out, he sent out across the world, and in different parts of the world. 4 children so far have found the tickets. Were all of them pleasant children? No, not even a little bit. No, they were obnoxious. They were spoiled. They were self-important and self-gratifying and gluttonous. If you don't know what those words are, look them up. These were not pleasant children. And the grandparents, in reading Mr. Bucket, Charlie's father, every time the newspaper came every day, he would come home and read the headlines about certainly who got the tickets, and all about these kids who found the tickets, and these children are just kind of on the disgusting side when it comes to their behavior and their attitudes and their character. Even though they're young, they're not very pleasant. Grandpa Joe, Grandpa George, Grandmas Josephine and Georgina, they one of them, I think it was Grandma Georgina or Josephina, one of them said, "Oh, stop reading. I don't want to hear any more about these awful children." And so there's only one ticket. There's only one ticket left. And, it's somewhere out there in the world. The next 2 chapters, chapter 9 is entitled Grandpa Joe Takes a Gamble. And I don't know what that is. Well, I do. I read the book a million times. If you haven't read the book, you've certainly seen the movie. But we're going to pretend that this is our first endeavor, because some of you, maybe you did see the movie, but you certainly maybe didn't read the book. Or some of you have not seen the movie, and some of you perhaps have not even read the book. So this may be your first time. So Grandpa Joe Takes a Gamble. We'll see what that's all about. The next day, when Charlie came home from school and went in to see his grandparents, he found that only Grandpa Joe was awake. The other 3 were all snoring loudly. "Shh," whispered Grandpa Joe, and he beckoned Charlie to come closer. Charlie tiptoed over and stood beside the bed. The old man gave Charlie a sly grin. And then he started rummaging under his pillow with one of his hands, and when his hand came out again, there was an ancient leather purse clutched in his fingers. Under cover of the bedclothes, the old man opened the purse and tipped it upside down. Out fell a single silver 10-cent piece. It's my secret hoard," said Grandpa Joe. "The others don't know I've got it. And now you and I are going to have one more fling at finding that last ticket. How about it, eh? Bet you're going to have to help me." Are you sure? Are you sure you want to spend your money on that, Grandpa?" Charlie whispered. "Of course I'm sure," "Shh," sputtered the old man excitedly. "Don't stand there arguing. I'm just crazy as you are to find that ticket. Here, take this money, run down the street to the nearest store and buy the first Wonka bar you see. Bring it here, bring it straight back to me, and we'll open it together. Charlie took the little silver coin and slipped it quickly out of the room, and in 5 minutes he was back. "Have you got it?" whispered Grandpa Joe, his eyes shining with excitement. Charlie nodded and held out the bar of candy. "Wonka's Nutty Crunch Surprise," it said on the wrapper. "Good," the old man whispered, sitting up in bed and rubbing his hands. "Now, come over here, sit close to me, and we'll open it together. Are you ready?" "Yes," Charlie said. "I'm ready." "All right. You tear off the first bit." No, Charlie said. "You paid for it. You do it all." The old man's fingers were trembling, most terribly, as they fumbled with the candy bar. "We don't have hope, really," he whispered, giggling a bit. "You do know we don't have any hope, do you?" "Yes," Charlie said, "I know that." They looked at each other and both started giggling nervously. "Mind you," Grandpa Joe said, "there is just that tiny chance that it might be the one, that this might be the one. Don't you agree? Just the slightest chance." "Yes," Charlie said, "of course. Go ahead. You open it, Grandpa." "All in good time, my boy. All in good time. Now, which end do you think I ought to open first?" That corner. The one furthest from you. Just tear off a tiny bit, but not quite enough for us to see anything." Then he tore it. "Like that?" "Yes. Now a little bit more, Grandpa." "Oh, you finish it, Charlie," said Grandpa Joe. I'm too nervous." "No, Grandpa, you must do it yourself." "Very well. Here goes." And he tore off the wrapper, and they both stared at what lay underneath. It was a bar of chocolate, and nothing more. All at once, they both saw the funny side of the whole thing, and they burst into peals of laughter. There's Grandpa Joe and Charlie laughing and laughing and laughing. So for a moment, there was a little bit of disappointment, but for many more moments, there was hope and there was excitement. And at the end, Charlie and Grandpa had a bar of chocolate, and they realized just how silly it was, but it was fun. "What the heck's going on?" cried Grandpa Josephine, waking up suddenly. "Oh, nothing," said Grandpa Joe. "You go back to sleep, my dear." And that's the end of chapter 9. Chapter 10 is called "The Family Begins to Starve." During the next 2 weeks, the weather turned suddenly cold. First came the snow. It began very suddenly one morning, just as Charlie Bucket was getting dressed for school. Standing by the window, he saw the huge flakes drifting slowly down out of the icy sky that was the color of steel. By evening, it lay 4 feet deep around the house, and Mr. Bucket had to dig a path from the front door to the road. After the snow, there came a freezing gale that blew for days and days without stopping. And oh, how bitter cold it was. Everything that Charlie touched seemed to be made of ice, and each time he stepped outside the door, the wind was like a knife. It was like a knife on his cheek. Oh, so cold. Inside the house, little jets of freezing air came rushing in through the sides of the windows and under the doors, and there was no place to go to escape them. The 4 old ones lay silent and huddled in their bed, trying to keep the cold out of their bones. The excitement over the golden tickets had long since been forgotten. Nobody in the family gave a thought now to anything except the 2 vital problems of trying to keep warm and trying to get enough to eat. There's something about very cold weather that gives one an enormous appetite. Most of us find ourselves beginning to crave rich steaming stews and hot apple pies and all kinds of delicious warming dishes. And because we are all a great deal luckier than we realize, we usually get what we want or near enough. But Charlie Bucket never got what he wanted because the family couldn't afford it. And as the cold weather went on and on, he became ravenously and desperately hungry. Both bars of chocolate, the birthday one and the one Grandpa Joe bought, had long since been nibbled away, and all he got now were those thin, cabbagey meals 3 times a day. Then all at once, the meals became even thinner. The reason for this was, well, the toothpaste factory, the place where Mr. Bucket worked, suddenly went bust and had to close down. Quickly, Mr. Bucket tried to get another job, but he had no luck. And in the end, the only way in which he managed to earn a few pennies was by shoveling snow on the streets. But it wasn't enough to buy even a quarter of the food that 7 people needed. The situation became desperate. Breakfast was a single slice of bread for each person now, and lunch was maybe half a boiled potato. Slowly but surely, everyone in the house began to starve. And every day, little Charlie Bucket, trudging through the snow on his way to school, would have to pass Mr. Willy Wonka's giant chocolate factory. And every day as he came near to it, he would lift his small pointed nose high in the air and sniff the wonderful, sweet scent of melting chocolate. Sometimes he would stand motionless outside the gates for several minutes on end, taking deep, swallowing breaths as though he were trying to eat the air itself. "That child," said Grandpa Joe, poking his head up from under the blanket one icy morning. "That child has got to have more food. Doesn't matter about us. We're too old to bother with. But a growing boy. He can't go on like this. He's beginning to look like a skeleton." "What can we do?" murmured Grandpa Josephine miserably. "He refuses to take any of ours. I hear his mother tried to slip her own piece of bread onto his plate at breakfast this morning, but he wouldn't touch it. He made her take it back." "No, he's a fine fellow," said Grandpa George. "He deserves better than this." The cruel weather, it went on and on. And every day Charlie Bucket grew thinner and thinner. His face became frighteningly white and pinched. The skin was so drawn so tightly over his cheeks that you could see the shapes of the bones underneath. It seemed doubtful whether he could go on much longer like this without becoming dangerously ill. Now, very calmly, with what curious wisdom that seems to come so often to small children in times of hardship, he began to make little changes here and there in some of the things that he did so as to save his strength. In the mornings, he left the house 10 minutes earlier so that he could walk slowly to school without ever having to run. He sat quietly in the classroom during recess, resting himself while the others rushed outdoors and threw snowballs and wrestled in the snow. Everything he did now, he did slowly and carefully to prevent exhaustion. Then one afternoon, walking back home with the icy wind in his face, he suddenly, incidentally feeling hungrier than he had ever felt before, his eye caught something. Suddenly, it was a piece of paper, and it was lying in the gutter, in the snow. The paper was of a greenish color, and there was something vaguely familiar about it. Charlie stepped off the curb and bent down to examine it. Part of it was buried under the snow, but he saw at once. It was a dollar bill. Quickly, he looked around him. Had somebody just dropped it? No, that was impossible because of the way that part of it was buried. Several people went hurrying past him on the sidewalk, their chins sunk deep into their collars of their coats, their feet crunching the snow. None of them was searching for any money. None of them was taking the slightest notice of a small boy crouching in the gutter. Then, was it his? Was it his dollar? Could he have it? Carefully, Charlie pulled it out from under the snow, and it was damp and dirty, but otherwise it was perfect. A whole dollar. He held it tightly between his shivering fingers, gazing down at it. And it meant one thing to him at that moment, only one thing. It meant food. Automatically, Charlie turned and began moving toward the nearest shop. It was only 10 paces away. It was a newspaper and stationery store, the kind that sells almost everything, including candy and cigars. And what he would do, he whispered quickly to himself, he would buy one luscious bar of chocolate and eat it all up, every bit of it right there, and then, and the rest of the money, he would take straight back home and give it to his mother. Bless Charlie. He's such a good boy. Well, that's the end of chapter 10. Charlie found $1, a whole dollar. To Charlie, $1 in those days was a lot of money. To somebody who's poor, today, $1 is a lot of money. So, just because of it being a rainy day, the best day for a story, I'm going to read 3 chapters today. I'm going to go ahead and read chapter 11, which is entitled The Miracle. The Miracle. Okay, well, we're going to see what this is all about. Let me show you the picture of Charlie finding his dollar, kneeling down in the gutter to pick it up. And I want to show you this before I read it. Charlie did, in fact, go into that store that sold just about everything, to buy himself a bit of chocolate with his newly found dollar. Charlie entered the store and laid the damp dollar bill on the counter. "One Wonka's Whipple Scrumptious Fudge Mallow Delight," he said, remembering how much he had loved the one he had on his birthday. The man behind the counter looked fat and well-fed. He had big lips and fat cheeks and a very fat neck. The fat around his neck bulged out all around the top of his collar like a rubber ring. He turned and reached behind him for the candy bar. Then he turned back again and handed it to Charlie. Charlie grabbed it and quickly tore off the wrapper and took an enormous bite. And then he took another, and oh, the joy of being able to cram large pieces of something sweet and solid into one's mouth. The sheer blissful joy of being able to fill one's mouth with rich, solid food. "You look like you want that one, Sonny," the shopkeeper said pleasantly. Charlie nodded, his mouth bulging with chocolate. "Oh, yes, sir, I did." The shopkeeper put Charlie's change on the counter. "Ooh, take it easy," he said. "It'll give you a gut ache if you swallow it like that without chewing it." Charlie went on wolfing the candy. He couldn't stop, and in less than half a minute, the whole thing had disappeared down his throat. He was quite out of breath, but he felt marvelously, extraordinarily happy. He reached out a hand to take the change, and then he paused. His eyes were just above the level of the counter. They were staring at the little silver coins that were laying there. The coins were all dimes. There were 9 of them altogether. Surely it wouldn't matter if he spent just one more. "I think," he said quietly, I think I'll just have one more of those chocolate bars, if you please." "Why not?" the shopkeeper said, reaching behind him again and taking another Whipple Scrumptious Fudge Mellow Delight from the shelf, and he laid it on the counter. Charlie picked it up and tore off the wrapper, and suddenly, from underneath the wrapper, there came a brilliant flash of gold. Charlie's heart stood still. "It's a golden ticket!" screamed the shopkeeper, leaping about in one foot in the air. "You've got the golden ticket! You have found the last golden ticket, hey? What do you know? Come and look at this, everyone. The kid's found a Wonka's last golden ticket. There it is. It's right there in his hands and in my shop." It seemed as though the shopkeeper might be going to have a fit. In my shop, he yelled. And he found it right here, in my own little shop. Somebody call the newspapers quick and let them know. Watch out now, Sonny. Don't tear it as you unwrap that thing. Oh, that's too precious. In a few seconds, there was a crowd of about 20 people clustering around Charlie. Many more were pushing their way in from the street, and everybody wanted to get a look at the golden ticket and at the lucky finder. Where is it? Somebody shouted. Hold it up so all of us can see. There it is, there it is, someone else shouted. He's holding it in his hand, see, the gold shining? How did he manage to find it? Oh, I'd like to know, a large boy shouted angrily. 20 bars a day I've been buying for weeks and weeks, and I found nothing. Think of all the free stuff he'll be getting, too, another boy said enviously. Oh, a lifetime of chocolate, he's so lucky. He'll need it, the skinny little shrimp, a girl said, laughing. Charlie hadn't moved. He hadn't even unwrapped the golden ticket from around the candy bar. He was standing very still, holding it tightly with both hands while the crowd pushed and shouted all around him. He felt quite dizzy. There was a peculiar floating sensation coming over him, as though he were floating up in the air like a balloon. His feet didn't seem to be touching the ground at all. He could hear his heart thumping away loudly somewhere in his throat. At that point, he became aware of a hand resting lightly on his shoulder, and when he looked up, he saw a tall man standing over him. Listen, the man whispered. I'll buy it from you. I'll give you $50. How about it, eh? And I'll give you a new bicycle as well, okay? Are you crazy? Shouted a woman who was standing equally close. Why, I'd give him $500 for the ticket. You want to sell that ticket for $500, young man? That's quite enough of that, the fat shopkeeper shouted, pushing his way through the crowd and taking Charlie's firmly by the hand. Leave the kid alone, will you? Make way there, let him out. And to Charlie, as he led him to the door, he whispered, Don't let anybody have it, Charlie. Take it straight home quickly before you lose it. Run all the way and don't stop till you get there. And understand, it's the golden ticket. Charlie nodded. You know something? The fat shopkeeper said, pausing a moment and smiling at Charlie. I have a feeling you needed a break like this. I'm awful glad you got it. Good luck to you, Sonny. Thank you, Charlie said, and off he went, running through the snow as fast as his legs would go, and as he flew past Mr. Willy Wonka's factory, he turned and waved at it and sang, I'll be seeing you soon. 5 minutes later, he arrived at his own home. All right, that's the end of chapter 11. So, Charlie has the golden ticket, the last golden ticket. And Charlie, as we know, is nothing like the 4 other children. You know, I wonder if you can remember their names. I wonder if I can. Augustus Gloop, kid who liked to eat. Veruca Salt, the girl who was very spoiled, had a father who owned a nut factory. Very spoiled, gave her anything she wanted. Violet Beauregard loved to chew gum. And Mike TV, the rude little gun-toting, gangster movie-watching loudmouth who was rude to everyone around him. And now our good-natured, compassionate-hearted, generous Charlie also has a ticket. Well, I'm very happy, very, very happy. Can't wait to see what's going to happen next. I'll bet everybody in the Bucket household is just going to be jumping up for joy, just as excited as Charlie. Come back with me and read the next chapter. Okay, bye-bye.